Hi, Philip.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. It's amazing how there's no time difference when we talk. You're in Mexico, I'm in Prague. It seems to work pretty well. So, we met like a month ago, 6 weeks ago or something already.
Yeah.
It was almost like a blind date. We didn't know each other, and we ended up in the same bedroom right away.
Skip the formalities.
Yeah. So that was it. That was interesting. But so I think it would be great to maybe just to talk a little bit about straight on what you were presenting there, just so people know kind of what this is about. I mean, I thought of using your paper. You wrote this paper a while back about your ideas about returning to a better kind of use of the land, and so maybe I could just ask you the one of the words you're using, one of the expressions is you talk about a climax ecosystem. And let me just repeat the title of the paper. It's called A Blueprint to Return to the Garden of Eden. So maybe you can kind of tell me what is your idea of connecting a kind of a biblical term, historical term, the Garden of Eden, with another term which would be the climax ecosystem. And I think you kind of see a connection between those.
Yeah. So that was from some work that I was fortunate enough to do with Ernst Götsch in Brazil, who presents a form of agriculture that aligns us back into nature. So the idea with being a return to the Garden of Eden is a succession that we used to have the privilege of being in this abundant system. The systems of nature were functioning in her climax ecosystem. And so the Garden of Eden is that climax ecosystem where we live in a world of abundance. And that's only possible when we align ourselves with nature and move with her in her energy. We follow her patterns. And while I was in Brazil, I was fortunate enough, as I said, to work with Ernst Götsch, who has presented this model of agriculture where we can look at our management and the way that we interact with the ecosystem to benefit it. And hopefully in this paper, I look into how we can return back to a Garden of Eden through agriculture, but also through an interaction, through the human interaction with the landscape, in somewhere where we are directly involved with it, where humans have a positive role and impact on this planet. And if we can just see where we went wrong, and correct our course, and in the same way that we create so much destruction and negative effects on this planet, we can have the direct opposite impact, which is to create abundant systems and return back into a Garden of Eden that in itself means that we need to establish climax ecosystems, which means that we need to preserve nature. Maybe not so much preserve nature, but evolve with it, is probably a better way to say it.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of course, it's difficult to paint the whole picture in a few phrases. So maybe to zoom in a little bit on, because maybe people don't know Ernst Götsch, a little bit about what are the main characteristics of his approach.
Yeah. So when we look at plants, and we look at how we go about agriculture, we normally try to create a seed that we can plant in the conditions that are there. We look at it as like an object, and what we really need to start to look at is what are the characteristics of this plant? What does it need? And how can we create the environment in which this life will thrive? So Ernest started as a plant genetic in plant genetics, and then, started to question the frame of agriculture where we're constantly pushing crops. We're selecting for drought resistance, creating GMOs, creating plants that are able to be put into our conditions. Whereas what we should really look at it is in the opposite, is, hey, what is this plant? Where does it like to grow? And therefore, as a steward of this landscape, how do I create those conditions? Because when we create those conditions, then the plant is happy and healthy. And therefore, we are also happy and healthy because we're seeing a positive response. So the idea of Ernst is really to change that opinion of not how can we create a plant to put into our system, but how can we create the system for that plant to thrive.
Yeah, and so one of those conditions is to create an environment for more plants, because this is one of the problems, right, with traditional agriculture, the monoculture principles.
Yeah, so one of the biggest ideas now is to maximize our photosynthesis capacity in terms of nature's currency is sunlight, and this goes down into the roots. Everything revolves off sugars in this world. Everyone loves cakes, cookies, and so does our soil. So one of the biggest factors that we're missing in our agriculture is the lack of photosynthesis, but also the lack of design. We're just creating huge monocultures in some way without taking into account the dynamics of nature. How does the wind move through the landscape? How is that temperature condensed? How are we creating cooler soil so that we can bring water back into the landscape and ultimately use, in some ways, and it says, plant water. And so when we see the more trees, the more species we put into one area, we're following nature's pattern as well, right? Like, a bird or an animal eats a fruit, and you have hundreds of seeds in one spot that's put down, and then it's up to nature to select which survives, which moves through. But we have an incredible variety of plants in one space, moving and working together, and through the success of one isn't the failure of another. It's a mutual help where the ecosystem can use these patterns and principles to develop itself. Diversity as a strategy is our biggest tool when we are so far back in a succession of landscape that needs a lot of trees, that needs a lot of variety. It needs, okay, what's going to grow now that we have no rain in this area? What is that plant, and how dense can we plant that? Well, as nature shows us, we can put down 1,000, 2,000 seeds in one area and allow them to all germinate, allow them to move through that process. And that's the process agriculture that we want to see. That's a process agriculture that we're missing when we're saying, okay, we just need a monoculture field. We just need this one seed. And with that one seed, we don't get any flexibility.
So there's, maybe it helps also to explain that word, which is often used by Ernst Götsch. I think he coined it, right? Syntropic agriculture or agroforestry. Because when I think of as a layman, although I have my hobbies, of course, it's difficult to control growing many types of vegetables or plants together, and not make sure it doesn't get overgrown by the species you don't want. And so how's the management involved there, and what is like the basic principle of the syntropic practice?
There's the basic idea of this. It's quite funny because when we presented this work with the Soil Food Web and Ernst Götsch, I wanted to call it syntropic agriculture, but Ernst changed the name and said we don't want to call it syntropic agriculture anymore. We just call it agroecology, just based on the You know, whatever the strategy is, there's a continuation of increasing the quality and quantity of life in the soil. Management strategies varies between different syntropic farmers. Some people do it really well, some people don't do it so well. It really does depend on the management or the availability of time. But what sorry.
So I was thinking of what they call disturbance, right?
Yeah.
So basically, that the idea that what animals used to do, the world would be roamed by millions of animals, and there would be a lot of disturbance of plants. They would be eaten, that would be trampled upon, it would be destroyed, and therefore there is a natural power to survive being released, because the plant thinks I really have to grow now, because otherwise I will disappear. So this disturbance factor is there, right? That's one of these ideas in syntropic, what I should call it now, syntropic
agroecology.
Agroecology.
Yeah. No. I sort of just hedged that with just saying that because of the amount of different farms that are coming out saying, okay, we're syntropic. He is just like, okay, actually, we'll just go with agroecology and let that be. But you're totally right about disturbance. This is the primary driving force of the system, which is that right now we kind of live on a skeleton planet, and we're losing, biodiversity at such an alarming rate. And when we look at the micro and macro factors that drive the system, as we talked about in the workshop together, it's all a big poop loop. And, the bigger the animals that we have in the system, the more cycling of nutrients we have. And then the complexification of that energy drives the system forward. So when we're moving from a herbivore coming through in a grassland, it's taking that grass into its stomach. The ruminant through 4 chambers now is complexifying it, and it's coming out in a highly fungal form that's feeding the soil. Then we have a couple seeds from trees that fall into that manure, and suddenly we've got a fungal rich environment that's starting to spread the seeds. And so as we reduce the amount of animals on the landscape, our primary goal as humans, because we've eradicated them, is to almost take on their disturbance or their patterns, so in some way start to move like the apex predator or the apex species of the environment, maybe. And so then we can really start driving the system forward, instead of having these stagnated forests or these stagnated areas that receive no disturbance. And that's not a part of saying that conservation is wrong, but maybe the ideas of what it means to conserve nature is almost creating a stagnation, which is the direct opposite of what syntropic agriculture or agroecology really looks at. Is, there's the time and there's a place, and can we harmonize our movement so that we are creating the disturbance in the right time, and therefore the system is increasing in the quality and quantity of life that it can put back down into the soil, be decomposed and reused and upcycled now. And that's the idea of Syntropy, is that everything's moving in an upwards direction, as in the same way we have entropy now. And so we have entropy of the grass falling down, we have entropy of the branches, falling, we have a dead tree, but then that entropy drives the syntropic force, which is, okay, that's being consumed, that's being put into the backbones of animals, into creatures, into fungi, and therefore it's helping the system move forward in the long run.
Yeah. So how do you see increasing the number of agricultural farmers starting to use these principles? And I'm asking this because when I drive through the country, whether by train or by car or take a bike ride, you see these enormous stretches of traditional agriculture, and you think, my God, how is that going to change? How long will it take for a significant amount of people to make some kind of transition? What are the thoughts about that?
So yeah, in our workshop, we went pretty detailed into the point of using, sorry, a microscope. I think that a lot of it does come with a huge education of, these big farmers, especially when I was in the Czech Republic. There are huge swaths of land now that have just been monocultured. There's no trees, and yeah, it is a big decision for any large-scale grower to adopt these strategies and principles. Personally, in permaculture, we talk about the small steps to meet people where they're at. And while it's really amazing to say, hey, let's plant these huge syntropic sites or agroecological sites with the tree lines, is that possible for you? Okay, if it's not possible, can we take a little bit of your landscape and use a simpler application, changing the input from chemical to biological, and start the conversation of, okay, biological factors are driving bacteria, they're driving a soil food web, and ultimately what really drives this is planting trees. So when we're starting to see our first success, can we then start having the conversation to the next step is planting trees? And the farmer will say, okay, yeah, like I see what you're talking about. There's some relevance, and it's a very slow process. There's also the mechanization of the different tools that need to come in for syntropic management. But I think those are more being held back by lobbies, I would say, more so than actually allowing the technology to come out. It's not so difficult.
Yeah. So if I think of hedges, these are the old way of preserving or creating that diversity, because that's the problem here in the Czech Republic and probably other countries too, but especially here there has been this collectivization of agricultural land after the Second World War, with the installation of a communist regime. They basically put all the farmland together. They kicked out the farmers basically, unless they were willing to cooperate with the Communist Party, which was not always the case, of course. And then every hedge, every separation between those lots was destroyed. And some people told me that you can see it when you fly, say from Prague to Vienna, or you cross the border. You can really see it clearly that there's huge slots of land in the Czech Republic compared to Austria, for example. So my question would be then: is that a good way to start reintegrating those hedges, or make the parcels? I don't know. You call that parcels, I suppose, to make them smaller.
Well, I think the first step is the hedgerows, as you're saying. These are definitely high biodiversity. They also allow us to plant a huge range of species that don't take up productive space in an agricultural field. They are our best options to use, and it's really sad to see the consolidation of land and the eradication of these hedgerows, which were, in England, where I'm from, there are still quite a lot of hedgerows, but these are the areas which could really be utilized well. And for a farmer, it's actually one of the best places to start, especially with syntropic farming, to bring in that diversity. When you look at hedgerows, how much, what they do in terms of biodiversity, bringing in pollinators, and then, as a physical barrier for the wind, reducing aridification, drying out the landscape. And then if we've got trees in that hedgerow, we're going to start the bionic pump again. The question is
exactly
just how big those hedgerows are.
Yeah.
And do we need to make a few more of them inside of the farm? Maybe.
Yeah. There's also the combination of swells, right? I just use an example of what happened on our cottage, where we had a huge flood. There were more floods last summer in the Czech Republic, by the way, by serious thunderstorms, but nothing stronger than previous years. Maybe just the places where it happened, and maybe the degradation of the land since before. Anyway, what happened was that we ended up receiving all the water from a couple of hectares. I mean, a couple. I'm talking about 300-400 hectares, which were funneled to where we are. And in 1 hour, we had a river there, and this could have been prevented by keeping the water within swells or some kind of more spongy-like topsoil. And so what you said, this water retaining is also part of that. And when you hear people talking about these doomsday scenarios in Europe, the drought or the climate change, and this could be a huge factor too, then, right?
Keeping
the water.
No, definitely. As you know, I like to say it's kind of more global weirding than warming.
Yeah.
Because we're not losing water as the climate's heating up and everything's getting hotter and hotter. We're just getting more extreme downpours, and so especially when we look at water management in the landscape, is the idea of slowing, spreading, and sinking that water. Whether we're using swales, whether we're doing tree lines on contour, whether we're planting hedgelines on contour, whether we're creating a soil sponge, however we're doing it to slow, sink, and spread that water back into the landscape is vitally important, as we are having more and more extreme flooding, and then huge droughts, and it's just like, okay, how can we slow down that water? Because once we percolate it back into the landscape, hey, it's starting to change the climate. And so we have that scale of permanence that we're talking about, the climate, we can't really affect that unless we go up and we seed it with maybe some rain clouds and steal Austria's rain, or we put up some metallic object to reflect the light, and all of these amazing, beautiful scientific ideas. And then you move through the scale of permanence, and you end up at soil at the bottom, though, like the smallest impact that we can have, the smallest amount of energy, but the biggest change that we can make. And then we suddenly see that when we start to affect the soil, we create a soil sponge. And through whichever management strategy, we can do that on our land. If we've got big machines, yes, I totally vibe swales for sinking that water into the landscape, or we just need to do contour hedges, or we actually just need to plant on contour, however that landscape looks like. And then suddenly we start to see a reduction in the heat, which is on our topsoil now. So suddenly the ground is cooler, and then there's not so much of a thermodynamic process happening where we have this hot soil mixing with cooler air, creating these massive storms, which are creating these massive downpours. So suddenly when we start to cool the landscape, we reduce the effect of the storm that's going to happen, and that's happening yearly. And the question is also, like, when is the government going to start to really incentivize big projects because that, farmers are obviously living hand to mouth most of the time. And that's the craziest thing as well, when you really get into those dynamics, is just, what is being financed? Okay, it's like diesel, you use it all up or you don't get it. And it's like, well, could we not change that into a different allocation of money? Could we change that into incentivizing, instead of just, how much diesel did you use this year? Okay, great, you used up all of your quantity. I'm going to give you that same amount of funding this year. It's like, well, maybe you use less diesel, and therefore I should take this amount of money and incentivize you to dig some swales or slow spread and sink the water. And then you can get all into the, the council funding of how much did it cost you to fix the roads? How much does it cost you to how much maintenance do you have to do per year, and how can we actually take this money and invest it into something where we design for it, and when we set everything in place, then nature just starts to do its work. And
but that sense of urgency, what you might have and what I might have, it doesn't seem to be present enough, say, to push councils, or to push farmers, I would say, and to push the consumer to faster action. It seems that things just go along, and okay, there's a little increase maybe in thunderstorms, or in the quality of food gets a little less. We get a little bit more sick, but because that's of course the direct effect of having less nutritious food. But how do you, I mean, without being alarmist, how to motivate people? I find it hard to imagine, if again driving through the countryside and seeing, say, 99% of the land being used in a traditional way.
There's so many things that come into that question, and it's hard to imagine that obviously the majority don't really start to see the problem unless it's right on their doorstep. Like once the house is either being washed away, or they turn on the tap and there is no more water coming out of the tap. It's just like, where does my water come from? Well, it's just, I open the tap and it comes out. Okay, but what are the processes that go on there? That's an educational fault, that needs to come, for me personally, that needs to come into, school systems for everyday conversation, and not just a scaremongering of like, hey, like, the amount of people who are like, yeah, we know the climate's, warming up. We know that we've got acidic oceans. But really, like, we don't have a choice. And I can understand that, like, you work a 9 to 5, you're doing what you can. And I personally, I believe that there is a consciousness that people would be able to act on something better if we were given the opportunity to provide that. And so, there's obviously, from the ground up, and then there's the bottom down. And so it's both need to start working together. It's unrealistic, the quality of life for me personally in England, knowing from my friends, everyone's working back to back, just trying to make it work. And it's really up to the government to start to say, listen, we can start to help create the game.
So it's in a moment. Sorry, Philip. The moment you start to talk about government, the signal is lost. So I don't know. It was everything went fine. The moment you start to raise your voice, and I don't know. So maybe you could repeat the last thing about the government should, you said, and then it was stopped.
That totally makes sense why there would be a signal loss on on that time. But no, just generally thinking about how difficult life is anyway for people to live, and could the government start to create more opportunities where there is, and I know the EU is trying to do that a lot, create funds to support organic regenerative agriculture, so that there are options for people to choose, and options that are affordable as well, options that they don't, where you have money at the end of the day to enjoy your life as well. So I think that the government really needs to step up and help provide that cushion when they have enough money to invest into quite destructive resources.
Basically, maybe it's part of the problem that the news cycle is driven by negative news, and this is actually very positive. This says, like, okay, we do have the means and we have the possibilities to make things better, but those things, they don't they're not so attractive for news news outlets, let's say, to traditional news outlets to come about. If I let myself being seduced to look at the headlines, it's basically 99% negative stuff. So this is and people also maybe are used to swallow huge amounts of negative information. So this kind of positive outlook on going back to paradise, coming back to the title of your piece. Actually, it's a super positive message. Maybe I'm just asking myself, why don't I hear about this more often and I'm not so much watching the news. I don't watch TV. I meet people, of course, but this is not part of the conversation. I'm pretty sure it's very for us, kind of like, I mean, us, like I went to this workshop that you were leading last month about soil health and all that. Because I have maybe a long-term interest in this stuff, but that's a very small amount of people, right? So maybe some billboards. I don't know, man. It's difficult to get the attention of people. I'm just brainstorming basically now. I think, like, okay, you go to a supermarket. You go to the Lidl, or I don't want to make a promotion, but that's the closest by here. And there's no sign. Yeah, okay, you got a little section of, this is bio, but it's people, they go in, they buy, they eat, and that's it. There's no intellectual thing going on in that whole process.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think that in that sense, that's really is we are, in some way, the quality of life is going down. I think that's really what David Holmgren talks about in future scenarios, which is we have an energy descent, and therefore everything becomes more expensive, especially when our economy is based on a fossil fuels. So when we have a resource that's lowering down in its resource capacity, everything else becomes more expensive. And so for the average person, and that's what I mean, is you walk into the supermarket, whichever one it is, you say, okay, I got to make a choice here. So yeah, I'm gonna get that one. And that's that's again is saying, well, could we take some money and really invest into big time agroecological farms, which do receive the funding to create these machines that, as Elsa, she made, was amazing in making the workshop happen in the Czech Republic. But they're working on plans right now from Ernst, for big scale machines to bring out into agroecological settings. And can we create the opportunities where someone can walk into Lidl and see a zucchini or an eggplant and look at the price and say, actually, you know what? Yeah, I can afford this. Because even personally for me, walking and buying organic food all the time, whatever that means, is really, really difficult. And I feel like also, the government makes a really good effort to point a finger at the individual. Hey, turn off your light because you're causing global warming, while we can run like huge industries 24/7 and you're a drop in the ocean. So yeah, there's a bit of irony behind the whole focus. And individual actions make a change. But yeah, ultimately,
maybe, sorry, it's like I'm by trade, I'm a musician, right? So and I also teach music in high school, and I always tell the students when they, not every day, don't worry, but I tell, this is the most important subject. Yeah, I think it is actually music. But where is the subject of this, what we're talking about, sustain ourselves with good quality food, and that whole mechanism which is behind it? So it involves, of course, biology, it involves geography, it involves any kind of side subject. It would be great to have that somehow integrated in a school system, to have workshops like what you did, workshops in schools on a regular basis, some kind of more structure and kind of how you call that? There's a word for it. I try to
some
find,
inoculation.
yeah, inoculate. That's a good one.
Yeah,
exactly. To lay those, to plant those seeds actually on an early age, and it's happening. Look, I'm one of the teachers in the school where I teach, the high school where I teach. We create since 2 years now, 3 years, ecological projects. So creating more green areas in the school. Talking in my case, I start to talk about and we plant things and talk about the whole permacultural principle, and but those are kind of small initiatives, but still, I mean, I think that should be standardized.
Yeah, definitely. It's a huge part in which we can have a massive impact. That there should be some curriculum based on agroecology. And it's positive. Like, I think earlier, one of the biggest things that I didn't say about this return back to the Garden of Eden is we, as humans, we're labeled, like you're saying, with the negative news, is labeled as the causes of destruction. And like, yeah, okay, sure, we have some terrible things, and when we have done, we have destroyed the environment to some extent, but that's not really why we're here. That's not really at all why, as animals, as part of the animal kingdom, we developed a bigger brain. And like, okay, so what does that mean? Why do we have a right and left side of our brain? And how can we start to see patterns? Something that we've never allowed ourselves to step outside of this, masculine framework of, okay, A is B and C and D. And it's like, well, what if everything's just connected? And what does it mean when we take a step back and activate our mind, where we can see connection and relationship? And that's what that curriculum would start to really teach them, is how can we see relationship in everything that we're interacting with? And then how do I fit into that system? And when we start to acknowledge that part, that's where Ernst has stepped into that realm of, creating a Garden of Eden. And we're creating a Garden of Eden, whether we're making that in a school with a permaculture, whether we're talking about infiltrating water, whether we're talking about planting trees, digging swales on contour. These are all steps towards creating harmony. And, I'll just quickly talk about, the mental health crisis for a lot of my friends, a lot of people, like, looking at the world now, the younger generation is just, wow, this is terrible. Like, I have no place on this planet. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The biggest point that we have right now is, hit rock bottom, but look at it and say, okay, this is our purpose. And moving through life with that purpose gives us, it's a huge responsibility. And when that's taken away through negative news or negative emotion, we go down into entropy, and in some way we start decomposing. But in the same way, we could turn that back around and look at huge examples: Jeff Lawton, Ernst Götsch, Dr. Elaine Ingham, the Waterman of India. Like, there's so many people on this planet who are creating incredible landscapes, and they're human. And if I'm a human, can I do the same that they're doing? Can I learn from them and change the context to fit into my local community? And doing that work, whichever scale it is, whether it's grand, huge scale, or whether it's just backyard, it all works together. It all works together.
It's when you talk like this, I hear a prophet. This is I'm not really joking, actually, because we need people with a vision, right? And you're mentioning all these people, and they are creating this creating their expressing a vision. And I was mentioning before, I sent you a small like a chapter from a book which I came across, And it's a book called The Gardener's Year by Karel Čapek, who is like one of the main Czech authors. And he wrote this book in the 1920s. And he mentions also in that book the Garden of Eden. It's and I wanted to use that. It's kind of a little bridge to in Czech you say Zahradníkův Prorok. Zahradníkův Prorok, meaning the gardener's year. And I wanted to use that in a musical way, and I thought, well, it's difficult to use it just like that. It's a bit lame to. And then actually my wife said, why don't you call it Zahradníkův Prorok? Now, prorok in Czech means prophet. So the title of the project, I actually start with this interview. You're my first interviewee. It's the gardener's prophet. It's kind of poetic, but it's like the one who gives the good news to people who are interested in nature. And garden again. It's the Garden of Eden again. So there's this. I just wanted to say there's this newer generation of people, of these prophets, but you also have people like Čapek, who are already in the 20s. Talks and that's not that long ago. Just 2 generations, talks about we're not cultivating or we're not growing land. Actually, we're taking care of the soil. He already mentions it in his books, now I should ask a question, right? This is it's not really an interview. I just wanted to mention that that soil thing, that's maybe because that was for me new when I went into the workshop. The secret is in the soil almost, and that's what people don't, and also including me. You don't think like that. You see a landscape, you see a field, cornfield in the summer, you think, or a sunflower field, beautiful, these sunflowers. But then you look at the soil, which you normally don't do, of course, and you will discover through the microscope what you did in the workshop, that wait a minute, that's exactly the problem. The soil is not healthy. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that soil, the magic of the soil.
That's really looking at how we talk about soil, whether we say soil, whether we say dirt, we just look at it as this material. Through our workshop, looking at what are the definitions that we even put on soil, what do we even look at when we say, okay, what is soil, how are these plants growing, and then when we look through a microscope, we start to see a micro universe. We start to see that there's a huge amount of life that just because we can't see it with our naked eye, it doesn't mean that it's not there. And when we start to shift our attention to see the processes behind soil, is really driven by these organisms which live in it. Just like we live on this planet, we totally affect the whole system of this earth. No one can deny that, whatever our actions are. And therefore, in the same way, that's a mirror image in the soil as well. What kind of organisms are in that soil? How are they interacting together? What's the relationship? And so when we really look through a microscope, or we look into that soil, we can start to see, are these healthy communities that are forming, or are these kind of detrimental communities that are forming? Not to say actually that any organism is bad. As Ernst would say, every organism is just fulfilling its function. But when we start to look at soil as a living organism, our approach changes. Now it's like, wow, it's, maybe there's feelings in there. Well, we know that there's feelings, but when we start to look at all the tests and the scientific data that's coming out of how these interact, there's a whole language. And just because we pick up a bit of soil in our hand and it's brown, or it's it's dusty, or all of these things that we're seeing, if we squeeze it together, Can it hold itself? Does it have aggregates? Does it not have aggregates? You know, what's driving that process? And really what's driving it is the microorganisms that are in that soil. But in the same way, it's not just the microorganisms, it's the plants above as well. And so really is, you know, we're not on a 2-dimensional plane here. We go into a, you know, at least 4D, 10-dimensional if we can, to understand that it's a huge interactive web of life that's functioning in the soil, that's actually allowing those crops to grow. And in the same way, it's the crops that are growing in that soil that are allowing the microbes to grow. So it's a duality system, and a multi-dimensional layered aspect of rains, humidity, and creating and cultivating a community of microbes that are driving ecosystems forward. And when we look at like keystone species, like these are like the key point. Like this is our key species that we need to really focus in on.
What would be one? Just name one keystone species.
So fungi is obviously fungi.
Okay, that's what you mean. All right,
is our biggest friend.
I see. So I was thinking, like when you said these last things, you know, George Carlin. He used to, you know, he made this joke, American comic. He said, or comedian. He said, you know, at a certain point, at the end of his bit about why did God create mankind, because it's, you know, making such a mess of it. He said he could create anything, but he couldn't create plastic, and that's why he created human beings, you know, to create plastic. So that was a pretty good one. But maybe I think of you and a microscope. Actually, it was a Dutch scientist, or what's his first name? His last name was Huygens. He lived in Leiden, and he's credited with the invention of the microscope, actually. And so maybe we had to come to that invention as a human species of the microscope, which happened in the 17th century, I believe, right? So, and now finally, it took 3 centuries to use that technology and actually make us aware of what's truly important. Because without the microscope, probably we felt it. Of course, we could see it from the results, and people had but now actually we can really as you do in your paper, basically you're showing there's this feature here. I just show it quickly. I think it works like this to show the people. There is basically you use samples from different types of landscape, 4 different types, if I believe, and so you do the analysis with the help of this microscope. So it's basically getting in touch with the invisible, and which is also the invisible in our own gut, right? Because that's the other connection you mentioned. There's not so much difference between the gut of the world, which would be the topsoil, right, and the gut of our own. You know, maybe isn't that what when they say in the Bible? Yeah, the God created man in his image, and he took a bit of earth.
Yep.
And he created man, right? So it's even like one-on-one. It's not just that we are that earth. Just one last thing I want before I let you respond, but because this is interesting in the Hebrew language, and of course the Garden of Eden was comes from Genesis, which is written in Hebrew, and there's a etymological very interesting thing about the word of man. So we call him Adam, but actually in Hebrew, Adam just means man, and it's called Adam, and or it's Adam. It's not called Adam. It's just man is Adam, and the word for earth or dirt is Adama. Adama. It's the same word with an extra letter to it. Can you imagine? So even linguistically, they figured it out.
Yep. Yeah, we're just rediscovering something that that was already spoken about and known. Like really, it's, you know, the microscope in some way now is a tool for us to not have an excuse anymore.
Yeah.
But as you're saying, you know, it's always been there. We've understood in some essence that we are, you know, we are what we eat. We are made from the earth, and therefore, whatever that is, whatever the situation is that our landscape is, reflects back into us. Is our landscape sick? Okay, are we as a society sick? You know, dirt, the erosion of civilization, like every civilization has been wiped out due to the way that it's taken care of its landscape. And it's so easy to forget how important it is when you look at soil and you just say, okay, it looks the same now. And, you know, really you got to take pictures of it, you know, because it changes so subtly, but it changes so quickly as well. You know, it's like, okay, from year to year, it hasn't looked like it's done anything, but really a lot's changed. And when we don't put our focus on the importance of the soil, we really slip up because we forget, you know, it's like home economics. You know, we forget that if the home economics aren't right, there is no economy. And so we don't pay for home economics. They're like, you know, as you know, for your wife and, you know, everyone who takes care of families and stuff know that if if that's not taken care of, okay, well, the government doesn't help that much for home economics. No, it helps a lot for, you know, financial economic, external economics. But we forget that if we don't take care of the direct home economic, just like our soil, we don't take care of our soil, there is no economy. There isn't zero civilization. And so it's so easy for us to overlook the most important thing because it's just so obvious. It's everywhere. Oh yeah, soil's there, soil's here. And then suddenly it's not. And then we go, oh God, that's a scary situation.
Yeah. So maybe I don't want to take too much of your time, but just to know a little bit about you, like how kind of, because you didn't start out probably as a young child with these ideas. So what kind of in your story, like how did you get it to be so interested in this?
Yeah, a lot of it probably started while I was traveling. That was probably the biggest impact that I had, to just step out of England and put myself in a different environment with a different conscious community of people, you know, talking about permaculture. It was there also where, you know, a lot of, you know, surfers were in a kind of alternative environment, you know, where it was just like, hey, we want to enjoy our landscape. We really enjoy nature, and therefore we need to take up action that preserves it. And so, yeah, as I talked about the scale of permanence, was like, well, okay, if we don't take care of our soil, we won't have these landscapes to enjoy anymore. We won't be able to go out into the ocean, you know, go for a surf, go for a swim, do anything, you know, enjoy, you know, really, you know, that's, you know, Masaman Fukuoka, you know, in his book, The One Straw Revolution, you know, how much time nowadays do we have for poetry? How much time now do we have for music? How much time do we have? And we really realize that as we've lost lost touch with our landscape, or we've reduced our time for enjoyment as well. And it's a really, like, these things to me all pushed me forward into studying permaculture, living in Costa Rica in a sustainable community for a year, moving on from there through Central America, working on different farms, becoming involved with the Soil Food Web School, learning about syntropic farming. It's been about six or 7 years of working different farms, and then the last 2 years of having my own consultancy company out here in Central America, where we are pushing helping farmers transition to have faith in nature, become aware that not everything's out to kill you or to kill your crops. Because we've spent a lot of time identifying, bacteria and fungi that just kill, and that's obviously it works in the scientific literature, but then when that percolates down into society, it means, oh my God, every single mushroom is going to kill me. At least in the Czech Republic, have quite a good foraging community of people who like to go out and enjoy mushrooms. Yeah. But when we start to look at nature in that aspect, for me and with my consultancy, is looking at restoring faith in nature-based solutions, and that's where I am today with Minds of Soil. Whether it's with Ernst Götsch and looking into agroecological solutions to prove that what they're doing drives the microorganisms, it drives fungi, it drives bacteria, it drives protozoa, it drives the nematodes, creating a soil food web that creates really highly productive systems. And looking at that paper that I wrote, we took 4 different landscapes so that you can actually see the change over his 40 years of management, and what it means when we take on different management strategies, whether we leave forests alone and they're not touched by anything, there are no herbivores that move through that landscape, there is no disturbance, whether it's on a monoculture cacao farm where we're following the recommendations, from agronomists that have gone to university, that have studied nature maybe, or studied agriculture from a book, versus someone who interacts and accepts feedback and looks at it through relationship like Ernest does. And through that study, we can actually see, we can have a huge impact if we just choose the right management strategy to have our agriculture. And working with him through that changed my my mind. It highlighted the importance of, if people don't understand why we need to feed microorganisms, why we need to change our agriculture, then I need to go out and teach that. I need to go bring my microscope to everyone and say, hey, listen, look at this soil and look at that soil, and we can say that there is a difference, and these are the key point species that drive healthy agricultural systems, or even just generally ecosystems as a general. Without those guys in the soil, we don't have the water infiltrating, and the trees won't be able to grow.
Yeah, so it's a lot of in education or in self-education, any type of increasing your knowledge and your capabilities. It's a repetition, right? So we have to repeat it. And when I followed the workshop, it was the first time I was in a lab since high school, I suppose. Yeah, actually, so that's a long time, and it's for most people it's like that, right? I guess. But my question is, so how can you make sure that people are in touch with that kind of discovery? Like, are you coming back? That's maybe my question as well. Are you coming back to the Czech Republic or to Europe? How does it look like for you?
Yeah, no, I think right now we are talking about coming back at some point at the end of this year. I think we're making a move back to Europe to also set up some roots there as well. So yeah, right now it's quite an open door, I'd say. Nothing's fully set, but looking forward to coming back. And it's just a lot of planning right now, seeing the options, and yeah, for me it was so inspiring to bring a group of people into a laboratory. Personally, I haven't been in a laboratory until school. I have my traveling lab that I move with, and the cool thing about that was that people were like, what, I can use a microscope. I feel that everyone was there with their enjoying that. We are. It's not just about a scientist telling us what's going on. We can be social scientists as well, And that's the cool movement that I love about this thing. It's saying, hey, look, like let's build our toolbox out so that, permaculture in the backyard, we have some little impact, we have a good impact, however that goes up. Then we start to layer on these other tools that we can start to use, that scientists use. Then we
but
start
you also
to
have, right, but you also have this whole technological progress which goes so fast. So if there's, I can imagine if there's a market for this, and there will be a market for this, people can have their microscope. It's also kind of like a kind of a kit where they can really, I mean, because to use the microscope on a regular basis, maybe that's hard to imagine for a regular person or even a regular gardener. Do you see some kind of future like developments in that?
Yeah, they do have some biometers that you can, I think they're quite expensive, the kits, just to get those readings. But yeah, I think that it has a place. It has a place, and it just depends on the person, what they want to do with it. Do they have kids? Yeah, like let's, every couple months, let's look at some fungi under the soil. Let's have a look at these organisms. Could there be one person in the community that does that? And then, of course, like, what's the context? Like, are you that interested in, in the soil, or can you do more visual references? And that's the thing where, so long as we understand the process, to me, the microscope is just a tool to really get people thinking about, okay, if I can now see these organisms, now I need to create the habitat for them, and therefore my management needs to go in this direction. Okay, do they have water? Yeah. Okay, what do I need to live? Okay, so what do these organisms need to live? And we don't need to be looking at a microscope to see that. We can just as these amazing scientists, from 100, 200 years ago, Victor Schwalberg were like, just observe nature, just sit there and observe it, and we can see what's going on. We need the microscope when we've forgotten how to look. And that's, what I loved most was my friend Fernando Revuelo. He has a Center for Investigation in the Syntropic Agriculture, and we worked in Brazil together before I went to Ernst. And he would describe it like this: we have this frame. We have a frame which is the microscope, which is KNF, which is our permaculture, which is all of these strategies that we have, and in the middle of it is the climax ecosystem. So really, we're just building a frame, and the picture doesn't change. The picture never changes. It's that Garden of Eden, and the question is, what tools do we have to get there? And for me, is always explaining, we have this soil food web approach, we have our microscope, but that's not the only way. And as we see in life, there's thousands of ways. I'm sure, as you meet students, you start playing things in a totally different way, and you're like, wow, that's so rad. And that's the expression of life. And it's like, we just need to see those patterns of expression and allowing it to move forward in that direction, like in that pattern. So long as we're not working against the pattern of life, it can only improve. And I would never say, okay, you always need a microscope. No, like, go out, smell the soil. How does it smell? Our senses are there for a reason. If we smell it, that's bad. If we taste it, like that's and it's not good, probably it's not good. Look at it under the microscope, and you'll be able to see, okay, what's the bacteria, what kind of fungi is there. If I'm working with growers, let's go into those specifics so that you're confident, so that we can restore your faith in nature. And that's for me why I work with a microscope with growers, with producers, because they love that data. But for the average person, is just observe. And if you want to go deeper, if not, that's fine. Like, you're doing what needs to be done. It doesn't need to be more complicated.
All right. Well, I think it's very nice. It's very positive. It's good to end on a positive note, and it's good to see that you are planning to come to Europe, and it's all also about community, right? I met you through another event, and there were so many people from the Czech Republic, but also from Slovakia, and one action like that, because you met Elsa, right, at some point, and she's from here, and so the ball goes rolling like that. And it's amazing how maybe you met, I don't know, how did you, just maybe to know, how did you met Elsa? Because that's the she is the one who set up the workshop here.
So I met Elsa while I was working with Ernest at his farm. She was part of a 3-month crew that came with Ecotop, an agroecological, what would you say, consultancy company.
Exactly, that's how I met Elsa, because they came here and they set up something in the university. Yeah.
And then we had privilege to go to Bolivia last year, or last May, to do again the soil food web test on their planting in a 15-year-old cacao research center. And she was also there at that time, and it was there that we thought, okay, let's bring this to Europe. Let's actually bring, for this research that's been done at Ernest Farm is the first time that we've been able to quantify microbial community in relation to syntropic farming. So it really opens up the eyes. And for Elsa, she was thought, let's bring this also to the Czech Republic, and then also empower the tools. We had 24 people all using microscopes, all looking at their own soil, and it was an incredible experience. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share any knowledge, my knowledge that I have, and to learn. It was an incredible workshop to be together on.
Yeah, I can confirm. It was really, and the beer afterwards was good too. Now.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, I'll never forget the beer. Such a great experience.
Yeah. I mean, as a foreigner in the Czech Republic, you have to be grateful for those well-kept traditions, right? Mushrooming and beer making. By the way, yeah. So I know there's so much more to talk about, but I think we could do that. Definitely some other time. One of my original inspirational ideas was to use Karel Čapek's book, The Gardener's Year, as a model. And what he does, he talks about January, then he goes to February. Not so surprising. So every moment of the year, there's something special, right? Now, this is the winter time, and it happens to be, we record this on the 31st of January, which was just in the month of January. So I don't know if it would be, say, somewhere in February we meet again, or March. It would be great February, but we can also find another prophet maybe. But to maybe just to add, because then it's January, cold. Nature is still waiting in this part of Europe, right? In the world, sorry, and part of Europe, by the way, too. You are in Mexico. You are. It's warm. You're probably. I don't know. What's the temperature there now?
We're probably right now about 20-25 right now. But we are in the dry season. So it is an interesting time, as you're saying. There's little water in the landscape. The trees have lost the deciduous trees here have lost their leaves. It's almost the direct opposite, where it's too hot. And so there is an element of how do we use the dry season to plan for the wet season. This is
exactly. That's kind of the mood here too, where you cannot do much. As Čapek says, the weather is never right. He's even 10 degrees too warm or 5 degrees too cold. It's either too wet or it's too dry. And this is good for this plant, but that's bad for the other plant. And it's basically it's just getting together like what we do now, exchanging ideas and getting ready for our spring here in Europe and for your wet season then.
Yeah, exactly. It totally is a time to come back inside and to create the plan for the year moving forward, and also to enjoy the previous harvest, enjoy the previous year, what went well, and what maybe didn't go so well. And I think that the Christmas period or the winter period is such it's really the only time you can stop, and start to,
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I got a friend of mine. He's called Petr Zelenka. He's a guitarist, but 7 years ago, he went into agriculture, and now he's a full-time grower, in the south of France. And but he'll be here in 2 weeks because it's his only time off. And so that's just the far somehow for me, farmer, I don't know how it's for you. Farmer, it's just because I'm a city boy, maybe. It's not sexy, term farmer. Agriculture, agriculteur, in French, agriculteur, also doesn't sound sexy. In Dutch, you say boer. Boer sounds horrible. Just the word boer.
Yeah.
So we need another word. Or maybe it's just me. I don't know. What do you think of
No. I know. I totally agree with you that it's probably the lowest, the least amount of people leave school thinking, hey, I'm going to become a farmer nowadays. And I won't go too much into it just because we do have this time, but it is totally for me a feeling of ignoring the utmost importance of their role. As farmers on this planet, there is no one more important than whether it's feeding us or preserving the climate. And there's a huge reason in my books why it's not sexy, why it's not, hey, listen, I am becoming a farmer, I'm becoming a land steward, I'm becoming this, I am fulfilling this role in society. Instead, it's looked upon as one of the, we often see it, it's poor. We have like agriculture settings where it's like, okay, this is for, poor people to do. It's like, well, actually, that's just a notion from the government. That's a notion of our society, and we need to put them on top. And for me, it's just absolutely alarming that we have this, that we have the structure. Saying, like, okay, you want to become a farmer or you work in agriculture. It's basically based on a class system, though. If you work a field, what does that mean? Oh, well, I own a field, I own an estate, and these are cultural things that we've been led to believe. And if we started to really see, through the Garden of Eden, they're saving the planet. And if we really started to look at farmers in that sense, it would be the sexiest thing going.
Yeah, totally. Especially when Eve is naked.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Hey, I have a couple of young future farmers maybe just behind this door who think I cannot hear them, but I just have to bang the door just to say goodbye without too much. I'm gonna do a disturbance, as you say.
Yeah.
Syntropic disturbance. 1 sec. Ero, pryč! Já to poslouchám. Weg! I can cut that out or not. No, the principle of disturbance, right? It's to cut out and it will come back with a vengeance. But this notion exactly of the stigma almost of the land soiling. No, was it toiling? Toiling. That's the word in English. Like oil the soil. It's there's a French song. It goes like Pauvre Martin, creuse la terre, creuse le temps. The poor Martin guy who's digging the soil, and then he's also losing his time. He's wasting his life. But this is, by the way, a great song with many layers by Georges Brassens. But when I am in, and that's probably your experience too, when you are in the land and you don't have to work from dusk to dawn, it's extremely inspiring. It's rejuvenating. It's vitalizing. It is very healthy. It's only positive, right? So yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it was really, really interesting when I was working with Ernst, and he would talk about, animals don't get tired. Like they rest, but they continually do the same thing all day, all the time. Whatever they do, whether it's a lion or a bird or whatever, collecting sticks from here or things from there, and they're just constantly doing it. Humans sit down at the end of the day like, oh God, I'm done with work. I'm tired.
No, exactly, and that's really my personal experience. And I at the cottage, I can really, this dusk to dawn thing, it doesn't bother me at all. And then when I'm in a classroom, when I sometimes, or traveling for concerts, that's something I don't like too much. You're another, and I have to wait an hour, and then there's a break, and all that kind of feeling of being in a space where you actually don't want to be, and which makes you tired in a way. So that's true.
So there's
all right.
That, perfect.
I don't know. I think they left now, these little buggers. I just look forward to seeing you in the springtime, or in the summer, because you were here in the Czech Republic when it was December. It was your first time, and so when you can come back, of course, when everything is blooming and growing, it will be a completely different experience. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it, and great to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you too, man. It's a beginning of the year, and the beginning of a long friendship and cooperation in a way, with this not just the food network, the soil network, but just the human network.
The life network.
So
the
exactly. You talked about fungi, and that being the biggest network in Oregon, for example, the mycelium network, and that's what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Hey, can just so people know, I suppose you have your, I know you have your website. It's Minds of Soil, right?
Yep, mindsofsoil.com. And then email is mindsofsoil@gmail.com.
mindsofsoil@gmail.com. So great. Yeah. So Philip, thanks so much, and I hope to see you in not too long of a time. And thanks for taking your time for this talk with a musician. All right.
Thank you so much.
Hey man. Bye, Philip. Bye, Philip.